Madam President, it is a pleasure to be here and to be talking about a subject that is probably one of my very favorites, and maybe I hope one of yours. That is I49. I only wish that Al Kessler could be here with us today. We all miss him very much. I'm going to introduce the co-speaker. Kent Rogers was born near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Grew up in Shreveport, though, and then went on to ULL in Lafayette, where he got his bachelor's in architecture and his master's in planning. He then went to work for an architectural engineering firm in Lafayette for a while, and then for the Lafayette Planning Commission, before coming back to Shreveport to work for the North Louisiana Council of Governments in '91. In '93, he became the director of NLCOG and has been since, and has had a great part in what has happened in the development of I49 in all of those years. He and Chrissy have 3 children. Wesley is the general manager at Old Oaks. Megan is at LSU in Baton Rouge, and Taylor is a senior at Byrd. Kent is going to be talking today about the I49 North project from Shreveport's 220 up to Arkansas, and he's also going to be talking to us about the intercity connector. And I'm going to be speaking to you as Executive Director of the I49 Coalition, which I'll tell you a little about in a minute. And I'm going to talk about the route from Winnepeg, Canada to New Orleans, Louisiana, and all of those things that are outside of what Kent is talking about. So you'll get a picture of the whole I49 corridor and what is happening, what's happened and what is happening in that corridor. Now what you see on the screen is what Kent and I like to call the Y map. You can see it kind of looks like a Y, with the long part going all the way up to Winnepeg, Canada in the middle of the screen, and then coming all the way down to New Orleans at the bottom. And that second part on the right-hand side of the Y is from Kansas City up to Duluth, Minnesota, in the Great Lakes. That's I-35. And when you look at that, it does make a Y, and it funnels traffic all the way. By the way, the left-hand side of that Y is from Winnepeg, Canada to Kansas City, and that's I-29, which has been completed for some time, and when combined with I-49 from Kansas City there in the middle of the screen down to New Orleans, it will create a 1,700-mile uninterrupted interstate highway that will just bisect the United States of America and connect Canada, the U.S., and through our port system on the Gulf Coast, it'll connect us to the Panama Canal in Central South America and all the places in the world that you can reach now. You'll be able to reach through the Panama Canal. That's why we call the coalition that I'm going to be speaking to you about the I49 International Coalition. And it was formed in 2002, about this time of the year, when we brought a group of coalitions together that were all ranging all the way from Kansas City to Joplin to Nevada and in Missouri, and from northwest Arkansas and Fort Smith and Texarkana in Louisiana, in Arkansas, and then the Shreveport I49 Coalition here, and one in Lafayette, one in Houma, and one in New Orleans. We brought all of those groups together in '92 and formed the I49 International Coalition. Al and I had been on a trip for I49 North, and we were coming back, and we got in a conversation, and I said, you know, Al, there was a group from Joplin up there last month, and there's a group from Lafayette coming up there next month to Washington, and there's groups from New Orleans and Kansas City and everywhere in between that are going to Washington to talk to their congressman or 2 or 3 about I-49. Their piece of I-49. just like our 36 miles that we were up there talking about. And I said, what would happen if we got them all together? And we all went to Washington collectively, and we talked about the whole route from Kansas City to New Orleans. And Al said, well, do you think they'd get together? I said, well, we could call them and ask. And so we did, and they did. And then we formed a coalition, and a coalition of coalitions. And a lot of things began to happen. In 2003, that coalition brought together the 3 departments of transportation, MoDOT, Arkansas Highways, and DOTD in Louisiana, and got them to form what they call the I49 Coordinating Committee. And they actually issued a report on a semi-annual basis to the coalition and let us know what they were doing, working together, and where each piece of I49 in those 3 states stood at that time. We also initiated a caucus in Congress that was composed of all the congressmen and the senators along the whole route, because as you can see, that line, how do I do that? Can you, go back, there we go. Thank you, sir. As you can see, that line right there bisects several states. It goes between North and South Dakota and Iowa and Minnesota. It goes down between Texas and Louisiana. It borders Oklahoma and comes down into Louisiana. So there are about 11 states involved in all of that. And so we got all of the congressmen and senators that lived in those districts to form a caucus in Congress, so that we had more than just Jim McCrary and 2 or 3 others in Congress that were supporting us. Well, that led to a lot of things. It led to a whole lot of activity in Washington. And in 2005, just about the same time as Katrina, just about the time Katrina came in, we got $328 million earmarked for I49 in Louisiana. Now, that was because mainly because of 3 people, 4 people, mainly 3. Billy Montgomery, who took the lead in Louisiana in promoting I49 in the legislature. John Kennedy, who came up with the idea as state treasurer of bonding a portion of the unclaimed property fund to create our 20% matching money in Louisiana. And I lost my train of thought. Jim McCrary, yeah, Jim McCrary. When we got the 20% money, Jim McCrary went to work in Washington, and he was the assistant, he was the vice chair of the ranking committee member of the Ways and Means Committee, which says how you spend the money in Washington. And so he got his cronies, and he got all the people he could put pressure on, and he got all the people in the Louisiana delegation to put their emphasis and their influence behind I49. He got us $328 million. That was more than they had got in all the years combined before that for I49. And it really made some things happen. Kent's going to tell you something about what happened right here in this area in just a little bit. So here's what's happened lately in our 3 states. In Missouri, it's kind of hard to see, but oh, damn, I hit the wrong button, Kent. Sorry about that. Kent is an invaluable asset. Kent is the one that developed all of these slides that we use regularly. He has the resources at the Council of Governments to create maps like this and slides like this, and he's been an invaluable member of the coalition in every. Yeah, he knows how to operate the equipment. That's right. I'm lost when he's not at the meetings. And while I'm talking about that, I also want to recognize one of our directors for the I49 International Coalition, who's right here in Shreveport, from a company that's celebrating its 100th year, its centennial year right now also, and That is Carlton Golden, the president of Builder Supply. Carlton. So in Missouri, last December, on the 12th of December, just about this time of the year, in Joplin, Missouri, there was a big celebration because they declared 180 miles from Kansas City all the way to Pineville, or Pineville, Missouri. They declared that I-49, and the signs were up. US 71 became I-49. There's only 6 miles left in Missouri between Pineville and the Arkansas border. A piece of the Bella Vista bypass, and that's going to cost about $25 million. So we're looking for the $25 million in Missouri. And right now our coalition is working with a group there in Missouri on an initiative. They lost one a couple of years ago. They're going to go back again and ask for a 1-cent tax, 1-cent sales tax, 10 years sales tax, statewide for highways in Missouri. So we're working with them. That's really what's happening in Missouri. In Arkansas, back in 04 and 05, they opened from Texarkana all the way down to Doddridge, which is just 4.5 miles on the other side of the Louisiana border. It's a beautiful highway called 549. When we connect the two states, that will become I-49. It's gorgeous. It's a great drive. I encourage you to use it often, and that costs about $250 million. The Doddridge connection from Doddridge to the border is under construction right now. It'll be finished next June, maybe even in May. They say May, but I always give them another month. But they say next May that'll be done. 4.4 miles, and then they passed a 1.5 cent tax in Arkansas last year. 1/2 cent sales tax lasts for 10 years, and that money is dedicated to new highways. And what they're doing with that is up in the northwest corner of Arkansas, where Walmart is located, where Tyson is located, Arkansas Best Freight, all of those huge companies that are up there. It's bumper to bumper from 3 o'clock to 6 o'clock every day. Those folks are working on the Bella Vista bypass. They took part of that 1/2 cent sales tax, and they're building 2 lanes. They're going to have to fund the other 2 lanes in some other way, but they're building 2 lanes of that 14-mile Arkansas portion of the Bella Vista bypass with part of that tax. That tax, by the way, will produce $1.8 billion. $1.8 billion to be used for highways. They're adding 2 lanes to the 540 that exists up there now, and 540 is another huge highway built to interstate standards that will become I-49 when we make all these connections. They're adding 2 more lanes to that, so it'll be a 6-lane highway from Fayetteville to Bentonville, where all that traffic and all that congestion is. And then at Fort Chaffee near Fort Smith, there is a 6-mile piece of I-49 being constructed right now. It's supposed to be finished next June. So they're taking pieces at a time, and what we're working on right now is trying to find some alternative funding source to supplement what the 80-20 formula will provide to build the highway between Fort Smith and Texarkana. That's the big hole in the hole. Ken is going to talk to you about North Louisiana and about the inner-city connector. I'll just tell you that otherwise in Louisiana, you may want to know that Lafayette to Shreveport, that 200-plus mile section was completed in May of 1996. It cost $1.4 billion. In South Louisiana, there's 160 miles from Lafayette to New Orleans that will become I-49. It's the transformation of US 90 to interstate standards. And the good news is that 100 miles of that's already done. It's been done in pieces ever since Mike Foster was governor, and we just been doing pieces at a time and doing an interchange here and there, but there's still 60 miles left, and the cost of that had gotten up to over $5 billion. But last Thursday, the really good news is, last Thursday, DOTD announced their new plan and new redesign of that section, and it's going to cut $3.7 billion off the cost. It still has to be approved. They have to change the environmental impact studies and so forth, but they're going to be able to save $3.7 billion on that project. They cut it down to about $1.5 billion, which is really, really great news. There are 6 projects that have already been finished along that route, $68 million worth. There's a $75 to $85 billion project underway. It's next to the design stage right now. It's in the city of Lafayette. And then there's 3 more projects that'll total somewhere between 95 and 140 million in St. Mary, Iberia, and Lafayette parishes. That's coming along pretty fast now, and the unclaimed property fund money that John Kennedy came up with is now going to be transferred when I-49 North is finished. It'll be transferred all to I-49 South, and is it just this weekend or last week? They're selling bonds right now of $93 million to finish I-49 North and $20 million to go toward I-49 South. So that's kind of where we are right now. And Ken is going to tell you about I-49 North and Inner City. Ken?
Gard mentioned a couple of things. You mentioned the $300 and some odd million that Louisiana received an earmark from a while back. And earmarks, right after that, earmarks got a bad name. And the funny thing is, one of those earmarks was $200 million that went towards this project. And every night after that, we got that nice big check from McCrary and the bidder's office. I said my prayers and I said, thank you, Lord, for that bridge in Alaska. Because it was the only one that got a bigger earmark, and had that bridge in Alaska not gotten that bigger earmark, we would have been the ones in the news every night getting bashed for earmarks and earmarks. So, it's kind of a two-way street there. But one of the best things that happened with that $200 million was we were able to get quite a bit of roadway constructed. There had always been talk of initially starting at 220 and working our way north. But when we were able to receive that large sum of money, one of the first things we did was to sit down with the Department of Transportation and with our delegation and say, the best way to do this is actually start at the Arkansas line and work south for 2 reasons. Once we start the Arkansas border and work our way south, we can get a lot more mileage built with that money than these 2 very large, expensive pieces at the southern end. The other part is that then puts pressure on Baton Rouge to truly help us find money to finish constructing this road. Because you don't want all this interstate highway in the rural area without the connection to the urban areas. So it helped put a little more pressure in Baton Rouge on finding funds to complete the rest of 49 North. But it also got us quite a few miles constructed and built. 2 weeks ago, or I guess it was just the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, I believe it was, we had a ribbon cutting. We opened up from LA1 up to 71. It's about 20 miles. Great road to drive on if you haven't done it yet, or if you're going up towards Texarkana or up to Arkansas, while y'all are Dutchman's and maybe you head in that direction, take the road. It's great. It's nice. March time frame, we will open from 71 up to 168. Also known a lot in this area as the Myron Curtis Road. The only reason we won't open it here is because Arkansas won't quite be done with their section yet, coming down from Texarkana. Once that section is completed, coming from Texarkana, we'll open all the way up from LA1 up to there. So summertime of next year, you'll be able to drive from LA1 all the way up to Texarkana and take the loop around Texarkana and start heading north on I49. Cut a lot of time, a lot of traffic out. Following to the bottom two sections of the traditional I49 north are from LA1 to the MLK Boulevard. That piece is under construction now. The roadway section from MLK to where the interchange will be at 220 was let for construction last week. And the actual interchange work will be let for construction in the early part of next year. That will complete the traditional 37 miles of I49 north. Final cost for all that, somewhere in the range of about $650 million. So you can see that $200 million helped quite a bit. But the interesting thing is, most interstate highways across the country have been built with 80% federal funds and 20% state and local match. From that $200 million that I mentioned and $600 and some odd million cost of the project, you can see that the state of Louisiana was gracious enough to put up quite a bit of money for this project, well more than the 80-20 match that's normally required. For the intercity section, Gard mentioned all the projects from New Orleans all the way up to Winnipeg. All sections of that highway have undergone the environmental work and environmental assessment, except for the final 3.5 miles within what we call the intercity connector of Shreveport and Shreveport. That's the only truly missing piece that does not have what Federal Highways and EPA call record of decision. We started work on that project a couple years ago. Roughly this time last year, we had a series of about 6 public meetings, presented some alternatives that were in the area. And from that series of meetings, there were some letters written to our congressional delegation, to EPA, to Federal Highways, to Federal Transit, and several other entities, asking us to look not only at what we had traditionally considered the no bill, but to look at that as the true build alternative. What that has done is add quite a bit of work to this project. We now have to analyze the use of 220 and the interloop to bring that up to interstate standards, to current interstate standards, to be able to handle the traffic and determine what the cost would be for that alternative versus the build options through. There were 4 build options that were presented for the intercity piece. 2 of these were the traditional that had been, discussed for many years, basically following the Allen, that's what we call the Allen Western Pair, along the old railroad corridor, basically taking a little bit of a left and heading north towards the interchange. The 2 additional alternatives that were developed, one was to completely miss the property that's currently owned by the Shreveport Housing Authority, and I went on the other side of Allen Avenue. The problem with that is it takes out several churches, including Galilee Baptist. The other option was to try and minimize the impact of that property and to minimize the impact to the developments that Community Renewal and Fuller Center had done in this area. Kind of swinging out a little bit from there. Part of what Federal Highways and EPA had asked us to do following last year's public meetings is to do some economic, not just the traditional environmental concerns and environmental analysis for all the alternatives, but also to work on some economic impact analysis for each of those alternatives. We're in the middle of that process now. We're looking to early summertime to have another series of public meetings to bring forth what the cost alternatives would be, what the construction cost would be for improvements to the interloop at 220, carry the traffic, what all the cost alternatives would be for the build option, but also what the potential economic impacts would be based on each one of these alternatives. Traditionally, one of the other things that they've asked us to do is, traditionally when you will identify what we would consider the preferred alternative, one single alignment through an area. Once you get that single alignment, that's when you typically go out and do extremely detailed environmental analysis, of historical analysis. We'll literally go out and do some shovel digs in various different spots. They've asked us to do that for all four of the alternatives through. So let's just add a little bit extra work to that and also do some of that same analysis along various different portions of the 220 unit option. Again, we're hoping that in early summertime that we can come to the public, present all those options, and at that point select a preferred alternative and move forward. At that point, there's probably about another 6-8 months worth of work left that the consultant firms would have. They then publish what's called the final environmental impact study. There's a all the different federal agencies review that document at that time. Technically, we're only supposed to have 45 days, but history has shown that it takes about 3-4 months for them to go through that process. So summertime following, we hope to have a regular decision, at which point we can start acquiring right away and building whatever that alternative is. Gard had mentioned earlier the unclaimed properties fund. One of the questions that we've had over and over and over is how we're going to build this project, how we're going to fund this project. The Unclaimed Property Act actually created two funds, the I49 North Fund and the I49 South Fund. There's caveat to the I49 North Fund. It covers anything from I-20 to the Arkansas line for construction, environmental work, whatever is needed. The caveat, though, is no construction funds can be spent from 220 south until the portion from 220 to the Arkansas border not only is completed, but if any bonds are sold against that project, those bonds have to be paid off. Hence, selling of bonds just recently for that portion, that puts us at a roughly 15-year time frame prior to we can even begin to investigate using unclaimed property funds money towards construction of this property. Downfall of that is that it leads us to look for other sources of revenue, other streams of revenue to help construct the project. I guess the only good part about that is one, it helps complete the 220 Arkansas border portion, but we would take probably at least 10-12 years before we can go into construction of this project anyway, so time frames may not be too bad. But again, we're hoping summertime to come forward with y'all, to everyone with a series of alignments that will help us to select a preferred alternative. And that, we'll open it up for questions.
Just a two-fold question. One, talk about why you would or would not use 220 since most of the infrastructure and the right-of-way is already there. And then two, this one is not related to that as much as had an opportunity over Thanksgiving to travel I-49 south to Lafayette. And that construction, that roadway is a major repair already. And where's the money coming from the repair? I mean, there are huge where your car literally leaves the ground if you hit it at the 75 because of bumps in the road.
Yeah, the quick, easy one for the repair work. There's a funding category from federal highways in the traditional transportation bills called interstate maintenance funds. That's all that those funds can be used on is actual maintenance projects for interstate. You can't use it to add capacity, you can't use it to build new, it's strictly for maintenance. So that's the funding pot that will come from. Some of that came from I know the area that you're talking about, and it's basically south, a little bit south of the Walls Lake area and all that wetlands area. There were some drainage problems with the original construction, plus some of just the changes, all the other development and drainage issues that they've had in the area. Yeah, there's some jobs that need to be done. For, I guess it's kind of a misnomer. Yes, from here to here is interstate standards. The interchange here at 220 is not interstate standards. if you're free flow on there, you have to slow down to about 40, 50 miles an hour, right there at 20 interchange. Current interstate standards require them to be built to a free flow of about 60 to 70 miles an hour. Most of the interloop, a great deal of the interloop is not constructed to interstate standards. So all that would have to be brought up to interstate standards, which means there's quite a bit of cost to that. The scary thing is that if you, depending on what design exceptions they will allow us to have, you likely could lose both the Linwood and the Ellerby Road exits off of the interloop. And as I told the federal highway folks, you think you have people screaming now, try to close those two intersections, I have a lot of people screaming. Yeah, and it's quite a bit of difference. Yes, ma'am.
So it's 3132, I-49.
If the preferred alternative for 49 is the build around, it would actually be signed as 49. The existing piece from up to 20 would have to be also redesignated, probably as a 149 or 549 or something. The only way to, we had eventual hopes and dreams of one day being able to re-sign that as 220 or 49 or something, but again, that would, the cost associated with that to bring up the interstate standards, again, would have to happen first.
Okay, I believe that we're about to run out of time, but Gard and Ken are both available after the program for any additional questions.